Good evening and welcome to Italian Military Archives. This is the very first live show on the second channel where I will try to answer your questions. Some of those questions came through some posts in the previous weeks, and some of the questions I hope I will be able to answer them online this evening, of course. I said second channel because some of you might know that I launched a YouTube channel 3 years ago where I posted both content in English and Italian. Earlier this year, I decided to open a separate channel entirely dedicated to the English content. So for mainly algorithm reasons, so to help the content to reach a wider audience. And here we are. You might have seen that I have uploaded a lot of videos. Most of them are from the previous videos uploaded on the Italian channel. But then there are videos like the one on Malta that apparently you liked very much, that are brand new videos. And this live show is another one, and I hope you will appreciate it. So let's move on with the main thing, how it is going to work. As I said, I will try in the first segment to answer your questions that came through these posts that I shared in the previous weeks. And then once I've done with this, I will try to answer live some of the questions that you might have, and please use the comment bar below to post your questions. Of course, I prepared much more for the questions that came through the post, so I will do my best to answer the live questions. Before we start, there are a few announcements. I enabled the channel membership, which is available. Now you go on the channel page and you press join, and there you can support the channel. The membership has just one tier for the time being, grants you some, the standard features of YouTube, the loyalty badges, custom emoji, priority answer, and preview of new videos. I can tell you that already now you can watch in preview a video about the Italian submarines that participate in the Battle of the Atlantic. The video then will be available to everybody sometime next week. But for those who joined the membership, can watch it already now. So enough from my side, and now we move to the answering part. So I listed them in order. So starting with the first one, which is also a hard one. Let's say, what's your favorite ship? So the short answer is I don't have a favorite ship because I don't like making top 10, top 3s, or a sort of absolute classification. So I would say I love almost all the ships, let's say. But if I have to pick some, I will go for, of course, we are talking about World War II ships. The Navigatori class destroyers are a class of ships that have always fascinated me, and they had a troubled career. They had a troubled start, a lot of stability issues, seaworthiness issues that led to several reworks, and then their high speed. One of the key features of their design was really downgraded to below 30 knots. But nevertheless, they found wide deployment in World War II, and they, let's say, were among the workhorses of the Battle of the Convoys in the Mediterranean. And only one actually survived the war, the D'Arecco. And actually, it's funny because the D'Arecco managed to serve for a very short period in the post-war Italian Navy. So when Italy transitioned from the monarchy to the Republic, one Navigatori, the D'Arecco, served for a brief period in the Marina Militare. Then, of course, I love the Littoral class battleship. I think they are very balanced and amazing ships, often overlooked because the Mediterranean War had some complex, let's say, dynamics, and the fact that they were never engaged in a major clash against other British battleships perhaps overshadowed their reputation. But I mean, I have a bunch of videos on the Littorius. I spoke a lot about them in this video, about their importance in the overall economy of the war. And also we had a chat with Drakinifel in the past live show that I've re-uploaded here in the channel. Cruiser wise, I would say the Duca degli Abruzzi and Garibaldi are very nice looking ship, and also very, very well balanced. Remember that they have the armor scheme similar to a heavy cruiser, so very impressive ships. And then the other ship that I put here in the slide, it's the Eritrea. The Eritrea was a colonial sloop. So a sloop meant for deployment in the colonies, so Somalia and Eritrea. And the Eritrea is perhaps going to be the protagonist of a video, hopefully soon, because it has a fascinating story. It was stationed in Italian East Africa. Then when the Italian East Africa fell to the British, the ship escaped, crossed the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, made it to the Indian Ocean, and then reached Japan. And then we are in February, March 1941, and the ship started to cooperate with the Japanese as a submarine tender, essentially, also serving in other duties. And then it stayed there until the armistice. And then when the armistice came, she managed to break out to the Indian Ocean again and reach Ceylon. And then joined the Allies for let's say, the co-belligerence period that started in September 43 and lasted until the end of the war. So a very interesting ship that has a fascinating story. A friend of mine labeled the story of the Eritrea like a famous movie, like Catch Me If You Can. And I think it absolutely fits the story of the Eritrea. So be confident, I will bring you a video on the Eritrea, hopefully this year. So moving on, another question which was partially connected to the Eritrea was about the Red Sea flotilla based in Massawa, in the colony of Eritrea, and why this flotilla was unable to interdict British shipping in 1940 and 1941. So the reasons are multiple. Essentially, as you can see from the list here below, the ships available to this flotilla were limited and, let's say, not very modern. And being the Italian East Africa very much isolated, the Italy was unable to provide fuel, new supplies, spare parts, new ammunition, and so on. So they had to live on with what they had at the start of the war. And then beside the Eritrea, which was not meant to fight other ships because it was meant to guard the coasts and do some colonial duties, not fight destroyers or cruisers. There were 3 destroyers of the Leone class. These were post-World War I constructions. They were a bit outdated by the time of World War II. And then 4 destroyers of the Sauro class, which again was one of the very first series of destroyers developed in the 1920s by Italy. I mean, I talked about these ships in the video about the Italian destroyers, so you can have a look. Then a few torpedo boats, 5 MIS, so the Italian motor torpedo boats, and 8 submarines, which actually were the best tool in the hands of the Red Sea flotilla to try and interdict the British shipping across the Red Sea. The thing is, the Italians tried to attack when they had a chance with surface ships, several convoys that crossed the Red Sea. This didn't lead to any significant success. Most of the times, the convoys crossed the Red Sea at night, so it was very hard, especially without radar, to find enemy ships at night. In addition, in many occasions, some light cruisers of the Royal Navy were deployed, so the destroyers of the Red Sea flotilla were not very able to face a cruiser force. So this was the thing for the surface ships. Regarding the submarines, they had a very bad start. Almost half of them were lost in the first weeks of war due to several problems. One problem was also the methyl chlorure. I don't know if it's the actual English term. I mean, it was a gas used in the refrigeration system, so the air conditioning internal to the submarines. Actually, the submarines that deployed in the Red Sea, due to the extreme conditions in the Red Sea, suffered from leaks of this gas that poisoned the crew. And then in two cases, in the case of the Macalé and in the case of the Perla, it led to basically the loss of the boat. The Macalé was lost, the Perla was lost, the crew abandoned the boat, but then it was recovered and towed back to Massawa, and was again operational in time to leave the Italian East Africa at the time of the Eritrea escape, actually. And it also was the protagonist of an audacious voyage that saw the Perla, that was a coastal submarine, so meant for short range Mediterranean operation to circumvent Africa and then reach Bordeaux, where the Atlantic base of the Italian submarine was located. So also the Perla deserves a video. So again, to wrap up, you can understand that with these limited assets available, that of course were not always operational because they had to go through maintenance periods and so on. Lack of fuel, lack of spare parts. This limited a lot the capabilities of this surface and underwater force. So that's essentially the answer to this question. Then another question was, why did the Italian submarines operate more effectively in the Atlantic than in the Mediterranean? Did the Germans have more of an influence in their deployment or tactics? Very interesting question, an important question. Actually, here I put some figures to frame the situation. Overall, 31 submarines were deployed in the Atlantic base in Bordeaux. They sunk from 1940 to 1943, 109 ships, totaling 568,000 tons of gross tonnage. And I mean, you will find more details in the upcoming video about these submarines that participated in the Battle of the Atlantic. While in the Mediterranean, overall, between the 1940 and 1943, considering the submarines that only operated in the Mediterranean, plus the new constructions that joined later, 136 submarines were deployed. And overall, they sunk only 12 merchant ships and 10 military ships. And here I also put down the displacement. You can see that the numbers are quite low for the Mediterranean submarines. But you have to consider one crucial aspect. In the Mediterranean, there were essentially no targets, especially for the merchant navy, because, you know, the British had seized the merchant traffic in the Mediterranean slightly before the entry into war of Italy. So the lack of targets played a lot in this low figure. Of course, there were convoys running occasionally when the British had to resupply Malta, and that was the case when some targets were available, and then some sinkings were achieved. Or other times it was the case of lone ships cruising in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Western Mediterranean and so on. There were a few military ships sunk. Also, one example is the cruiser Bonaventure, sunk a few days after the Battle of Matapan. Also, the cruiser Cairo sunk during Operation Pedestal. So there are cases of military ships sunk. Of course, the German U-boats take the lion's share here because, you know, they sunk Ark Royal, they sunk Barham, so these big ships. The thing is also important to consider the fact that these submarines considered here include boats that were destined to the transport mission to resupply the North African garrisons, and later the Africa Corps and the Italian Army Corps deployed side by side the Africa Corps. And then other submarines meant for training, meant for mine laying. So this number has to be taken with a grain of salt. From a publication by Bagnasco and Maurizio Brescia, I managed to retrieve this data, which is very interesting. It gives us an idea of how many boats were available every month on average in the 4 years of war. And you can see that 42 submarines were operational in the first year of the war. So you don't have to take the overall number of available submarines as the number. You have to take into account that some are outdated submarines, some are undergoing training, some are undergoing maintenance work in dry dock. So this number is it's very much important, and you can see that with the progression of the war, it decreases to the minimum of 19 in 1943. The thing is also, as I said before, probably I have to double check. These numbers probably include some of the submarines that were destined to transport missions and to mine laying. Again, some submarines, I mean, the Italian submarines were usually deployed in ambush zones, especially in the first part of the war. And then with the progression of the war, the Italian Navy saw that it was much more useful to keep them operationally ready and then concentrate them in case of a Malta convoy, as it was the case in 1942. So this was called in Italian schieramento a massa, so mass deployment of the available submarines in case military and merchant targets were available. And then I also reported here the number of the submarine lost in the Mediterranean in the 4 years of the war. Of course, 1940s half of the year, and 1943 accounts for the month up to September. So another interesting question was about this. Were there any nationally recognized Italian war heroes who won honor in actual combat from before the armistice of September the 8th, 1943, which effectively ended Italy's participation in the Axis, who then actually turned around and fought as co-belligerents and continued their personal heroic struggle? Sorry, I cut down the question here. Actually, yes, there were many. I also put here people that fought bravely before the armistice and that continued to fight. They remain loyal to the king and to the legitimate government, and gained honor. And in many cases, they died in the fight against the Germans. The first and perhaps one of the most famous is Luigi Duran de la Pen, the guy who sunk HMS Valiant in Alexandria. So the guy that, among others, penetrated the harbor on board the human torpedo, the Maiali, and then sunk the Valiant. He was captured, and then when Italy signed the armistice, he joined the new, not the new government, the government of Badoglio, and he remained loyal to the king, and then he was repatriated back to Italy. And actually he helped to reestablish the frogman unit in the south of Italy. So the former 10th MIS, it was called now Mare Assalto. And then he participated in some operations with the British, targeting some ports in the north of Italy, where they tried to sink warships, Italian warships that were not operational anymore, but they could be used by the Germans to blockade the harbors of North Italy and prevent the usage of the harbor to the Allies. So he was perhaps one of the most famous who continued to fight after the armistice. And then here I put Jerzy Kulczynski, that you can guess from the name. He was half Polish, born then raised in Italy, and then he joined the Navy and fought until the armistice. And then after the armistice, he participated in the organization of partisan groups in the north of Italy, gathering men from the armed forces that were scattered and isolated in the north of Italy. And then he was captured and then executed by the Germans. Mario Mastrangelo was an officer stationed in Cephalonia, one of the Ionian islands of Greece. He was an officer of the Navy commanding a shore battery, and he was the protagonist of one of the first clashes in Cephalonia, where the Italians opposed the German landings there. His actions and the actions of other men of the Cephalonia garrison led to the Battle of Cephalonia, where so the Acqui Division and Navy personnel fighting the Germans for around 2 weeks, and then eventually isolated and surrounded by the Germans and pounded by Stukas, they were forced to surrender. Then many men were, especially among the officers, were executed, and Mastrangelo was one of them. Moving on, I brought three other figures. Marenco di Morione was actually an admiral that, for instance, he commanded a cruiser division at the Battle of Calabria. I brought him because then after the armistice, he joined, he was in the north of Italy, and he joined partisan groups in the north of Italy. So you imagine an admiral, which was also quite old for the time, that joined the resistance fighters in the north, hiding in the woods, in the mountains. So a very interesting figure. Then Alfeo Brandimarte, this guy was actually involved in the realization of the Italian radar before the entry into the war. And then in 1943, he joined the clandestine Navy resistance group that was in Rome. Rome was occupied by the Germans, and he, with other people like Maugeri, which I will talk about in a moment, joined this group of people that essentially were enacting sabotage actions or providing intelligence to the Allies, especially to the US Fifth Army. And then Brandimarte was captured by the Germans and then executed almost a few days before the liberation of Rome, if I remember correctly. Maugeri was an admiral. Actually, he was for a long time the chief of the Secret Service of the Regia Marina, and then he was in Rome at the time. He remained there, and he also joined this group that also Brandimarte joined. This group was led by Admiral Ferreri, and then Maugeri was like the guy in chief of the intelligence operations, and he also provided a lot of intel to the American Fifth Army, that then eventually liberated Rome in June 1944. So this was a very brief description of these people, some of these people that fought before the armistice and continue to fight, remaining loyal to the legitimate government of Italy, which we should remember. Badoglio's government, although he, let's say, handled in a dubious way the transition towards the armistice and afterwards, it was the legitimate government, and they remained loyal. And they fought in dangerous and difficult conditions until the end of the war. So another question was about Operation Abstention, which occurred between the 25th and the 28th of February 1941. So for those of you who are not familiar with this operation, it deals with this island that you see on the picture. This is the island of Castellorizzo, which is the Greek pronunciation. In Italian is Castel Rosso. And this is the island of the Italian, at the time, of the Italian Dodecanese, which lays to the extreme east. It's here circled in red. And actually, in February 1941, Churchill was, let's say, inclined to mount many offensive operations in the Mediterranean. We have to remember that at this time the Italians have been pushed back to the gates of Cyrenaica. Sorry, to the gates of Tripolitania, so the western part of Libya. The Africa Corps has started to land, and they are holding the line. The push into Cyrenaica has not started yet. The Italians are also on the defensive in the Greek-Albanian front. The Greeks have pushed back the Italians. By this time in February, the Italians have managed to stabilize the front. But so Churchill at the time is pushing for aggressive operations against the Italians. One would be, for instance, a few months after February, the bombardment of the harbor of Tripoli. So among these initiatives, one was the capture of Castelrosso. The idea was to capture this tiny island and start to base there some light surface units like motor torpedo boats, and then provide perhaps the jump start for an occupation of other islands in the Italian-held Dodecanese, which this move was also seen as a way to persuade Turkey to progressively align much more with the Allies. So this was the overall picture in a nutshell. What happened? On the 25th of February, the British land a commando force of around 200 men. They land before dawn on the island, and they defeat the tiny Italian garrison, amounting to 30-35 men. And the ships that brought them withdrew, and then a British gunboat, the Ladybird, entered the harbor of Megisti. They are actually bombed since the early morning of the 25th by Italian aircraft based in the Dodecanese. This rapid intervention leads the British to postpone the landing of an infantry company of the Sherwood Forester regiment that was scheduled for the day. They decided to postpone the landing to the night, so to avoid the retaliation from the Italian aircraft. The thing is, during the evening, the night of the 26th, some Italian ships, especially the torpedo boats Lupo and Lince, are sighted by the commandos, and this information is communicated to the British Admiral Renouf, who's in charge of the operation, and then he decides to postpone again the landing. He doesn't want to being caught at night in a surface engagement with his exposed transport ship, and he decides to withdraw to Alexandria and then essentially to re-embark the soldiers on destroyers and then proceed with the landing. The thing is, in the meantime, the Italians land around 250 men from the Italian army, plus 80 sailors from the landing companies. They land these people on the island on the 27th, and this force manages to repel the British commando, isolating them in a corner of the island. On the 28th, the British land some people from the Sherwood Foresters. They link up with the commandos, but they evaluated the situation is a bit complicated, and they opt for a complete evacuation. So in the night of the 28th, all the British forces, the Sherwood Foresters that have landed, and the commandos are evacuated, and then Castelrosso is fully recaptured by the Italian. And actually, the man who led the recapture and the operations around Castelrosso is Admiral Biancheri, who at the time was commanding the naval forces in the Dodecanese. He was actually a very interesting, energetic man, very pragmatic. He actually led the operation on board a surface vessel circling around the island. So he put himself at the front line, and actually this experience led the Italians, and especially Biancheri, to train in the, let's say, amphibious warfare, especially the forces that were available in the Dodecanese. And actually, this experience proved interesting and valuable for the campaign in Greece. For the campaign in Crete, because some of you may not know that the Italians participated in the occupation of Crete, actually landing an infantry regiment in the eastern part of Crete. Actually, the Germans requested this intervention in a moment where the balance of the battle was still very much uncertain, and the Italians landed in Crete 2 days after the request, so in a very brief period of time, because they had trained for this after the experience in Castelrosso. Let's move on. In the meantime, if you have questions that you would like to you would like me to answer in the second segment of the show, please put your questions in the comment sidebar. Sorry. Okay, this is a very interesting one, for which I made some research. It's a nice topic that I wanted to investigate a little bit further. I have an interest in the concept of the Washington Treaty cruiser killers. I read online Italy pondered this idea, as well as proper battle cruiser designs and the UP 770 design, but information is limited and often contradictory. And this is very much the case, I would say. Can you shed some light on the design leading to the Littorio class? So we are talking about designs for battle cruisers, but also battleships. So designs for ships that never came true, let's say. So to answer this question, I relied on the few issues of Warship, this magazine that is published every year by Osprey, which is fantastic. That's the word to describe Warship, which contain a few articles that are of great interest to answer this question. The first one is Warship 2023, where you can find an article from Admiral Michele Cosentino, who was also many times a guest on my Italian channel, and he wrote an article about the designs for new battleship between the late 1920s and early 1930s. So he brings up a few sketches that were found in the archives of the Italian Navy. And to begin with the first one, actually here you see the original card that Admiral Cosentino found in the archives. And then here are redrawn made by John Jordan for warships. So this is a battleship design that actually is part of a set of designs made by a guy named Luigi Barberis, who, instructed by the Navy Chief of Staff, he prepared a set of designs of battleships of different displacement. He began with a design of 14,000 tons of displacement, then a 20,000 tons of displacement, and then 27,000 tons of displacement. And the sketches that are included in the article mentioned here are about this latest group of battleships that design of 27,000 tons. This is the first one, P1. You see, it resembles the Pola cruiser, the Pola, one of the last one of the Zara class cruisers. Partially also the Bolzano, I would say. But you see the armament is consisting of 12 305 millimeter guns in four triple turrets. The displacement, it's around 27. Length is 205 meters. And the speed here, if I remember correctly, was around 30 knots. Yeah, the designed speed that this ship was meant to reach was 30 knots. An interesting design, especially for the adoption of 4 triple turrets. Then we move to other 2 designs which are very interesting and are found in the article. In the meantime, let me know if you hear me, you see me loud and clear, if you see the image correctly, and so on. So our feedback is always appreciated. Anyway, this second design is very interesting. It's it's a it's a battleship which is way larger than the previous one. It's 257 meters long. The beam is reduced to 25. The previous one was 33. The interesting part is, beside the displacement is a bit lower than the previous one. The larger size of this ship is, you can see it from the big space left in the center, is meant to host a very powerful engine apparatus. If you see here, is more than 212,000 horsepower compared to the previous one, which is essentially half the power. And this is because this ship was meant to reach a speed of 36 knots. So yeah, very, very fast battleship, also very large for the period considered. And the armament was a bit strange because it should mount the 8 guns in 4 twin turrets. The caliber was 356 millimeters, which is a caliber quite unfamiliar for the Reggio Marina, because in the Great War we had essentially the 305 millimeters. Then these were rebarreled to 320 millimeters, and then with the Littorios we got the 381/50. So this gun caliber was quite unusual for the Reggio Marina, but nevertheless it was put in this design. We are talking about the period between 1929 and 1930, 1931. This is the period where Barberis is drawing these designs. This proposal, the S4, which is very similar to the previous one, essentially the same size, the same engine apparatus. What is different is the armament. You can see here that there are only 6 guns, but these are 406 millimeter guns. Sorry if I stick to the millimeter things and I don't use the inches, because sometimes I get confused, so I tend to reason in millimeters. But so to give you an idea, this is the gun caliber that you could find on the South Dakota, the Iowas, the North Carolina, and so on. So this is a very interesting design. I would say it's the culmination of the concept of the fast battleship, let's say. Would have been interesting to see it in reality, but for the period it was meant to be perhaps too costly, and the times were not mature enough for the design of this behemoth, I would say. Actually, from what we can read in Cosentino's article, the chief of staff discussed these studies with Barberis, and then they conceived that they came to the conclusion that the ideal displacement was 25,000 tons, but then they decided to not push for these designs, and then nothing came from this proposal, which however are quite interesting. Also this one, the S4 proposal, is equipped with guns that were never studied, not never studied, never actually, because once I read a study about the 406 millimeter guns by the Ansaldo, but these guns were never came close to the realization. So it would have been a lengthy process to design and build these guns. Then going to the battle cruisers, another article from Michele Cosentino comes in our help, actually from the latest issue of Warship from 2025, where he has published an article is only on battle cruisers, and here we find essentially three designs. For the battle cruisers, the information available is even more scarce. So there are here I managed to put together everything I got. So the first one dates back to 1928. So essentially the same period as Barberis put forward the battleship studies. So probably this was a period when the Regia Marina was starting to consider what to do in the case of building new battleships, because remember, France and Italy were allowed by the Washington Naval Treaty to build 70,000 tons of battleships before the end of the battleship holiday. This is because they, at the time of the Washington Naval Treaty, they had a fleet of battleships that was quite outdated compared to the other major powers. So they had been granted this clause. So in this period, the Regia Marina also considered the design for new battle cruisers, which were units never designed by the Regia Marina. And I have to say, by looking at these designs, I see a tendency of essentially merging the concept. I mean, the time of the clear distinction between the battleship, the dreadnought type battleship, and the battle cruiser, typical of the Great War, is essentially over. The two types are converging to the fast battleship concept. Anyway, the first design that Cosentino brings to us in the article is this one from 1928, essentially, for a ship of 23,000 tons, armed with six 15-inch guns. So I remember this in inch, so the 381 millimeters in 3 twin turrets. And this is the only available information that we have, and this is the only sketch that we have in the article. Then there is another design for which we have an interesting testimony, let's say. There was a scale model at the Technical and Naval Museum of La Spezia in Italy. Actually, I didn't see this the last time I went to the museum. Probably it's in the magazine right now. Anyway, in these pictures you can see the model that was held at the museum, and the plate actually says incrociatore da battaglia, which is the Italian word for battle cruiser. A battle cruiser mounting 9 15-inch guns, armed with a secondary armament comprising 100 millimeter weapons and also 152 millimeter weapons, so the 6-inch guns. We have no other information except for general length beam. It's a bit larger than the previous one that we saw, but then again, here the information is very sketchy. Probably it was part of these designs that the Regia Marina put forward between the end of the 1920s and the beginning of the 1930s, when they're starting to see what to do next. The final design that is in the article of Warship, it's the Auto Project Type F, which is the last one, dating back probably to 1933. And here you see actually a profile that reminds me the Bolzano, if we look at the conning tower. And then its arm, also here the choice of the armament is quite odd. 12 guns in 4 triple turrets, and the guns have the caliber of 343 millimeters. Again, a caliber quite unusual for the Regia Marina. Looking at the speed, the size, this ship was meant to. Let me find the figure that I noted down. Was meant to have a displacement of more than 27,000 tons and a speed of 29 knots. So there is a tendency to approach the specification of the Littorius, and probably the design of the Littorio of the fast battleship proved to be the most convincing one. And then the result was that no battlecruiser was ever produced by the Regia Marina. So the last piece of information. Sorry. Then I forgot this other part about the battleships, because in the period following the laying down of the Littorius, so after 1933, 1934, Cosentino brings us other sketches, other projects that were laid down by the Regia Marina for what is called battleship of moderate displacement, in Italian corazzata nave da battaglia di medio dislocamento. Essentially, it's a battleship the size of the Cavour and the Duilio class. The armament is similar, using 320 millimeter guns. Probably at this point, the Italians were conceiving the idea of building, besides the Littorio, a certain number of medium-sized battleship to boost up the numbers. There were quite some sketches. One of the four presented here by Cosentino is this one, which is very interesting. Actually, you can see a very strange conning tower, quite high. And then you can see that there are no funnels here. This is because this particular version of the battleship of moderate displacement, actually the plate number 5, I think, this was meant to have a full diesel engine apparatus. And then there were meant to be underwater exhausts. So very interesting and strange design, which led to nowhere, since you know that the Littorius were built. Later, 2 more Littorius were laid down, and then Italy decided not only to rebuild the Cavours, but also to rebuild the Duilius. Perhaps this being the economic-wise the wise decision to do, because we have to remember the first enemy of every navy is the budget. One last issue of warship, actually from 2006, a quite old one. I found this. I found in this issue an article by Vincent O'Hara and Enrico Cernuschi, where they talk about the breakout fleet. So the plan, the later plan of the 1930s to build an ocean-going navy, like, let's say the Plan Z of the Kriegsmarine, something like that. And in this article, I found 2 interesting references to the Italian pocket battleship, and they bring up this design from 1933 for a pocket battleship displacing 17,000 tons, armed with 6 254 millimeter guns. Another unusual choice for the period, since the guns of these calibers that we had in use date back from the beginning of the century, and they were placed on armored cruisers like the San Giorgio and the San Marco. So this was perhaps a design for the breakout fleet that was meant to operate in the bases that Italy wanted to build. I mean, there were already some bases in Italian East Africa, but they probably wanted to improve the facilities there to base a larger fleet, and probably this design is associated to this plan of building a breakout fleet. And then another interesting project is the so-called UP-41 design. I mean, there are very few information available from the sources I went through. And in this article, they say that this design was, let's say, an improvement of the Littorio, this design was not considering the Washington Naval Treaty limitations. But then the Italians decided to not pursue this design and perhaps build the new Littorius because it was easier and let's say less costly to build two improved Littorius. And then they actually sold this design to the Soviets. And probably I'm not very knowledgeable about Soviet battleships design. Probably this saw some interest from the Soviet Union, but as you know, they never built battleships of this type. But again, an interesting piece of history that perhaps needs some more research, and probably this would be one of the topics I will try to investigate more in the future, because it's true that about this topic of the interwar designs there are many information, and also in these three sources that I consulted for this video, there are many gaps in the information. We don't know exactly what this ship was meant to do. We are not sure about the time frame, so there is a lot of room for more research here indeed. Okay, I've read regarding corruption within the armament companies in relation to supplying substandard materials, whilst owner made lots of money. Is it true? Do you have a viewpoint? If it were true, did it affect the performance of the Regia Marina? So I would say, short answer, no, for the Regia Marina. And then it's not about it's not about corruption, but it's more about bargaining power vis-a-vis the ministries of the armed forces. And I would say it's much more applicable for the army and for the air force, because in that domain you had the monopoly of Fiat, and in some cases also Ansaldo, that were able to impose some types of aircraft and impose some types of tanks and engines for tanks to the armed forces, and this led to suboptimal, to say the least, solutions. Perfect examples are in the fighters, the CR-42, the G-50, and others. But I don't want to go out of the naval domain too much. Being restricted to the naval domain, I would say no. In general, there was a case called the armor plate scandal. In Italian, it's called Scandalo delle Corazze, which saw the involvement of the Ansaldo factory, which was the company producing the armor plates for most of the Italian ships. And at some point in 1933, they found out that some of the plates destined to the cruiser Montecuccoli were below the standards. This led to some troubles and ultimately to the resignation of the president of Ansaldo, which was at the time General Cavallero, who will later become the Marshal of Italy and also chief of the Comando Supremo, the chief of general staff, let's say, of the Italian armed forces from the end of 1940 until early 43. But overall, there were no big issues with the materials provided to the Regia Marina. I've read sometimes discussions about the torpedoes, especially the torpedoes produced in the Naples factory were below the standards, and because there were some corruptions going on. I went through this story. It was not corruption. There were some. Italy had 3 torpedo factories, one in Livorno, one in Fiume, and one in Naples. The one in Naples was perhaps of lower quality respect to the Fiume, and the other one in Livorno, which was the subsidiary of the Fiume factory. But overall, in the literature, you find often the statement that overall the Italian torpedoes were were fine. They didn't perform below the standards, or there were no systematic problems in the torpedoes, as it was the case in the early stages of the war for the Germans and for the Americans. Uh, the problem with the Italian torpedoes was that they were not so much advanced in their technology, because they still used the compressed air engine, and they had contact fuses. And of course, this was this type of weapon was performing worse compared to electrical torpedoes with magnetic fuses, which performed well and better in the war. Especially the electric torpedoes doesn't leave the tail below, so it's hardly spottable. And then the magnetic torpedoes allows for the torpedo to inflict much more damage, because it can explode while passing below the keel of the ship or nearby, while the other one, the classic ones, have to impact on the hull of the ship. And that was the case, for instance, for the torpedoes used in Taranto. In the case of Giulio and Cavour, they exploded beneath the ship. So that's the thing about the corruptions. So the short answer is no. Okay, there was another question which also goes a bit outside my expertise, but I will say a few words about it. It's about the Regia Aeronautica, so the Italian Air Force. How did the Regia Aeronautica respond and adapt to the aerial situation over Malta? What tactics, innovations, and lessons did they learn between 40 and 43? So, long story short, the Italian Air Force performed quite, let's say, not very well compared to the expectations during World War II. It was never able to field a sufficient number of aircraft, and they performed, as you know, the level bombing, which was not always effective, especially if carried from higher altitudes. The Italian Air Force didn't have dive bombers at the start of the war, so this limited the precision of the bombing done over Malta. This changed a bit with the arrival of the first Stukas that equipped Italian air wings from September 1940, but still in very limited numbers. Take into account that overall, until 1943, the Italians received 160 Stukas overall. So you can imagine that with these numbers diluted over 3 years of war, you cannot do too much. Then another problem, especially for the fighters, is that beside the fact that there were still biplane fighters that at some point against Hurricanes and Spitfires couldn't do very much, unless caught in a very close and maneuver fight. The Italian fighters did not have radio. The monoplane fighters had a radio but could only receive transmissions. So you can imagine that coordination was also a bit problematic. This changed with the later version of fighters like the Reggiane 2001, the Macchi MC 202, and so on. But I would say the main problem of the Regia Aeronautica was the attrition it suffered and the always low number of aircraft that, of course, were scattered across many fronts. We have to remember that in the first part of the war, especially from late 1940 to spring 1941, the Regia Aeronautica is busy in Greece, and in Greece they face a lot of attrition, and it puts even more attrition on the already limited number of aircraft available to the Italian Air Force. So long story short, this is the answer. And of course, the Germans helped, especially when they deployed in Sicily and intervened against Malta. But this is limited to certain time frames, especially the first four months of 1941, 4 or 5 months, and then the 3-4 months of 1942 until what is May 1942, because we know the April 42 is the period where Malta is mostly bombed, but then the Luftwaffe withdrew the majority of their bombers for the operations elsewhere, especially on the Eastern Front. Okay, then we have another question. I think is the last one of those that came through the. No, there is another one. No. Yeah, that's the last one about of the question that came through the post. Hitler Germany adopted radar earlier. Do you think it could push the Allies out of the Mediterranean? No, because the balance of forces could not be changed by installing a few radar sets on ships, because if the Italians had implemented radar earlier in the war, they still had a very limited industrial apparatus which could produce very little radar sets. Also, the Germans, when they provide the radars, the data, they provided few numbers of radars. So having a radar on the flagship, on the Vittorio Veneto, on the Littorio, yes, it could have helped, especially in detecting incoming aircraft. But what would have been really changing would have been having many radar sets on the smaller units like torpedo boats, destroyers, that were busy in escorting the convoys bound for Libya. But this would have been rarely the case, and again, the balance of forces of the forces of the Allies versus the forces of the Axis in the end would have played against the Axis anyway. Here I put some pictures of the earlier radar installed on the Littorio. You can see the picture on the left corner. I highlighted the very first experimental set installed in 1941 on the Littorio, which didn't function very well. And then you have the second picture. You have the second antenna installed on the top of the range finding tower, and this worked partially, but the Italian radar was never fully satisfactory. And the third picture is actually the machine that was put in front of the operators of the radar. The Italian radar and the development of the Italian radar will be certainly a video that I will publish at some point in the channel. Okay, I'm done with the questions that you sent me through the post, and for which I studied a little bit more in order to provide you some more comprehensive answers. I will go through briefly the questions that you put in the chat. In the meantime, I remember to you that if you want to support the channel, leaving a like or subscribing helps a lot. And if you want, there is the membership for which you find the link in the description of the video. Okay, Bob, Willie. Okay, John says, my father served as an officer in the Italian Navy right after World War II. Can I get a copy of his service record? I'm American. Okay, for this, I think you have to write an email to the Italian Navy Historical Office, and they should be able to send you the record. It will be in Italian, but it should be feasible to do it. Actually, I type in the chat my email if you want to reach out for more precise information, and I can tell you to which address to write. The Historical Office of the Italian Navy has a lot of information, and they also reply to you in English, so don't worry. For those of you interested in this kind of questions, you can write me an email that you find on the information on the channel. But anyway, I'll write it in the chat. Anyway, it's itmilark@gmail.com in case you're interested and if you want to know more about how to find this information about your father and possibly for other people, other parents. Okay, Willie asks how prevalent and widespread were the mine-laying operations by the Reggio Marina. They were very much a thing for the Reggio Marina. They placed a lot of minefields in the Sicilian Channel and also along the Libyan coasts and also along the Italian coasts. I have an entire volume of the Italian Navy Historical Office that it's just about mine-laying operations, and at some point I will do something on it. To give you an idea, the Force K, the surface force based in Malta that was ravaging Italian convoys in October-November 1941, that led to a true crisis in the Italian convoy system, actually found its demise on a minefield that was laid in front of Tripoli. They lost a cruiser and a destroyer. Other ships were damaged, and then, thanks to this minefield, the Force K ceased to exist. And then after that, and with the Italian also sending battleships to escort the convoys, they managed to solve the crisis, and then you have the, let's say, the happy period of the convoys in the first half of 1942. Okay, let's move on. Okay, Bob asks about my Matapan episode in English or with subtitles. So this refers to a documentary because it's more than 1 hour long video about Matapan, the Battle of Matapan, that I posted last year on the Italian channel. Actually, I have done the translation in English. I have to record the audio. That's it, and it's taking me a lot to do this. I have to apologize. My original idea was to publish it by September of last year, but due to life and many things, I couldn't do that. But hopefully by the end of this year, I should be able to publish it. Now that also this channel is monetized and I have much more incentives to push and publish new contents here, I'm confident that this year you will have the Matapan episode available in English, which goes into the detail of the whole event from the Italian perspective. So be confident, Bob. Okay, Greg says, I grew up in Rhode Island, USA, and my favorite uncle was born in Sicily. I understand you just fine, really. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Greg. Very much appreciated, especially I see that there are a lot of US people watching the channel. Actually, your uncle was born in Sicily. If you browse the page of the channel, you find a live show that I did on World War II TV from the good friend Paul, where we talked about the Sicilian campaign in 1943. So I recommend you this episode. Okay, then Bob asks, if Italy had an operational aircraft carrier in 1940 with the quality of aircraft in use at that time, do you think the naval war in the Mediterranean would have ended differently? No. Probably the aircraft carrier would have been a high valuable target of the Royal Navy, so maybe this would have been hit during the Taranto raid, probably, or could have been attacked in other operations. Who knows? I mean, one aircraft carrier wouldn't have changed the war, I would say. Having an independent naval aviation with higher numbers of reconnaissance planes based on land would have changed a lot, because it would have provided the Italian Navy more eyes on the sea. Having an aircraft carrier probably could have changed something in how Matapan played out, because having a close air patrol could have defended better against the torpedo bombers and could have prevented the tragedy that occurred on that night. So this is my take on the aircraft carrier. Okay, let's go on. Okay, very good question. Was it wise to upgrade the Andrea Dorias too, or would it have been politically acceptable not to upgrade them? Okay, the issue of upgrading the Andrea Doria and the Duilio, it's an interesting one because you are in a situation where you are laying down two more Littorios, so Roma and Impero. You're about to. Um, you have upgraded the Cavours and you have the two Littorios. Somebody has questioned the idea of modernizing these battleships uh, while you could have prioritized the completion of the Littorios of the first two and then the second batch. The thing is, probably the choice to modernize the Duilios was to build up fast and to a lower cost uh, a decent sized force of battleships that could be still be a threat. Because remember, also the British did not have infinite battleships. If you can field a Duilio or a Cavour on a certain operation, and the British have only cruisers at their disposal, they are thinking twice to engage a force which includes one of these battleships. Of course, if British battleships are involved, the situation is different, but then you can bring up the Littorius. So I think the idea was to have a higher number of battleships available sooner and to a lower cost. Okay, I don't see other questions at the moment. We have been together for more than an hour. So I think it's a good time for a Q&A show. If you have specific questions or requests, please reach out to me to the email, especially for those of you interested to retrieving the records of family members that fought in the Italian Armed Forces. And remember that next week there will be the new video on the Italian submarines in the Atlantic, which is already available for the people who pledged to the channel by becoming a member. Sorry, and I hope you like this chat, and then probably I will organize a new one at some point in October or in November. And remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Again, thank you for being here tonight, and see you very soon here on Italian Military Archives.